William Harrison lay perfectly still on the Italian leather sofa, his breathing deliberately steady, eyes closed to mere slits. Through his lashes, he watched the boy approach 12-year-old Daniel, his housekeeper's son, whose blue eyes bore an unsettling resemblance to Nathan's. The Hermes wallet lay exposed on the coffee table, $3,000 in crisp hundreds fanning out like bait. The boy stopped. William's pulse quickened. Here it comes, the moment that would prove what he'd learned in 10 bitter years since the accident. Everyone has a price. Daniel's hand moved forward, trembling. The boy's fingers hovered over the money, and William felt his cynicism solidifying into truth. Then Daniel did something that stopped William's heart. He pulled out a handkerchief from his pocket, carefully covered the wallet, and whispered, "Mr. Harrison shouldn't leave his things where they could fall." The boy adjusted the curtain to block the afternoon sun from William's face, then tiptoed away. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. William Harrison hadn't always been a man who tested the hearts of children. 10 years ago, he'd been a different person entirely, a devoted husband to Grace, a loving father to 8-year-old Nathan, and a pharmaceutical entrepreneur who believed success meant nothing without family to share it with. That man died on a rainy November night when a drunk driver crossed the median on I-95, taking Grace and Nathan in an instant. The accident left William with three things: overwhelming grief, $3.2 billion, and an Arctic emptiness where his heart used to be. The 15,000-square-foot mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, became his mausoleum. He'd fired 7 housekeepers in 2 years, one for humming Grace's favorite song, another for suggesting he donate Nathan's toys, others for infractions he could barely remember. Trust had become a foreign concept. Everyone wanted something from the billionaire widower, and William had convinced himself that human kindness was merely a mask people wore while calculating what they could gain. Sarah Thompson had arrived 3 months ago, desperate in ways William recognized but chose to initially ignore. Her husband David, a decorated army sergeant, had died in Afghanistan 3 years prior, but not from combat. Cancer had claimed him first, requiring treatments that drained their savings before the army could deploy him for his final tour. The young widow carried $200,000 in medical debt like a stone around her neck, working 16-hour days to keep creditors at bay while ensuring her son could stay in school. She'd been a teacher once, 4th grade, with commendations filling a folder she'd never shown William. Pride ran deeper than poverty in Sarah Thompson's veins. She never complained, never asked for advances, never mentioned the night she went without dinner so Daniel could eat. William had noticed anyway, the way he noticed everything from behind his fortress of grief. Daniel Thompson was 12 years old, brilliant in the way that broken children sometimes become when books offer escape from unbearable reality. He carried his father's watch and dog tags everywhere, tucked beneath his shirt like talismans against a world that had already taken too much. Every evening, William observed him writing in a leather journal, filling pages with careful script. The boy dreamed of becoming a doctor to help veterans, a dream that seemed impossibly distant from their cramped quarters above the garage. But it was Daniel's eyes that unsettled William most, the same shade of blue that had looked up at him from Nathan's face, asking for one more bedtime story on that last night. The plan had formed in William's mind 3 weeks after Sarah started working at the mansion. He'd been watching Daniel from his study window, observing how the boy walked Aurora, the white husky who'd belonged to Nathan. The dog hadn't let anyone except the groundskeeper near her in 10 years, yet she followed Daniel with a devotion that made William's chest tighten. It was then he'd noticed it fully, the way Daniel tilted his head when thinking, the careful way he moved through the world, even the slight dimple when he offered his rare smiles. The resemblance to Nathan was coincidental, certainly, but it had awakened something dangerous in William, hope mixed with terror. For 3 months, William had studied them both. Sarah arrived at 5:30 each morning, working with a quiet efficiency that spoke of profound exhaustion held at bay by sheer will. Daniel would slip in after school, always knocking softly on door frames even when alone, as if apologizing for taking up space. The boy had developed a routine checking on Mr. Harrison during his lunch break at precisely 12:30, ensuring the older man had eaten something from the tray Sarah always prepared. William had observed this pattern long enough. Today would be the test. not just of the boy's character, but of William's own theory that grief had taught him the truth about human nature. Everyone could be bought. Everyone would take what wasn't theirs if they thought no one was watching. Even children, especially desperate ones. The wallet was deliberately chosen his everyday Hermes, worn enough to look genuinely forgotten rather than planted. The $3,000 inside held symbolic weight, $1,000 for each year since David Thompson had died, though William would never admit to such sentimentality. He'd arranged the bills to fan out slightly, making them impossible to miss. The coffee table's position meant Daniel would have to pass directly by it to reach his usual spot by the window where he typically adjusted the curtains. Aurora lay by the fireplace, her ice-blue eyes tracking William as he positioned himself on the sofa. The dog knew something was amiss, she always did. Her tail twitched once. A question, before she settled her head on her paws to watch. William heard Daniel's footsteps in the hallway, lighter than Sarah's, but carrying that same apologetic quality. The door opened slowly, and William forced his breathing to remain deep and even, his eyes closed to barely perceptible slits. Through his lashes, he watched Daniel enter, carrying his worn backpack, a sandwich wrapped in paper towel visible in the side pocket. The boy's lunch, probably peanut butter again. Daniel stopped mid-stride when he saw the wallet. William could see the boy's entire body tense, his shoulders drawing up as if preparing for a blow. For 30 seconds, William counted. Daniel stood absolutely still, staring at the money. His hand moved to his collar, where William knew his father's dog tags rested beneath his shirt. A gesture the boy made when anxious. Then Daniel stepped closer, his hand extended toward the wallet, fingers trembling visibly. William's heart sank with familiar disappointment. Of course, the boy was human. After all, poor, desperate. His mother worked herself to exhaustion for pennies while $3,000 lay unguarded. Who could blame him? William almost wanted him to take it, to validate 10 years of carefully cultivated cynicism. Daniel's fingers were inches from the bills when he stopped. His hand pulled back as if the money had burned him. The boy looked around the room, then at William's supposedly sleeping form. He moved closer to William instead, and for a terrifying moment, William thought the boy might check if he was truly asleep. But Daniel was looking at something else, the harsh afternoon sun streaming directly onto William's face, with movements so gentle they barely disturbed the air. Daniel pulled the heavy curtains closed, dimming the room to a comfortable shade. He then walked to the side table, poured water from the pitcher Sarah always left there into a crystal glass, and set it within easy reach. From his backpack, Daniel pulled out something William didn't expect, a small knitted blanket, obviously homemade, probably by Sarah. The boy unfolded it and laid it carefully across William's legs. Finally, Daniel approached the wallet. He picked it up carefully, closed it to secure the bills inside, and walked to the writing desk. Opening the drawer William used for important documents, Daniel placed the wallet inside and pulled out a piece of paper from his school notebook, in careful cursive. He wrote, "Mr. Harrison, your wallet is in the safe drawer. Mom says lost things aren't ours to keep. I hope you had a good rest. Daniel." He placed the note where the wallet had been and tiptoed from the room. William remained motionless for 10 minutes after Daniel left, his mind reeling from what he'd witnessed. The note lay where the wallet had been, the boy's careful handwriting, a rebuke to everything William had believed about human nature. He sat up slowly, his hand reaching for the note, reading it twice more as if the words might change. Mom says lost things aren't ours to keep. Such a simple principle, yet one that felt foreign in William's world of corporate raids and hostile takeovers. He walked to the drawer, finding his wallet exactly where Daniel had placed it, the bills undisturbed. The homemade blanket still lay across the sofa, carrying a faint scent of lavender laundry soap, the inexpensive kind Sarah bought with her own money because she wouldn't take the expensive products William stocked for the house. The water glass sat within reach, condensation beating on its surface, a small gesture of care from a boy who had every reason to take advantage of a sleeping rich man. A memory crashed through William's defenses with violent suddenness. Nathan, age 7, finding a $20 bill in the park. "Can we keep it, Daddy?" What do you think we should do? Turn it into the police station. Someone might really need it. William had been so proud, ruffling his son's hair, telling Grace that night how their boy understood right from wrong in his bones. That boy was dead. Yet here was another child, one who had far more reason to take what wasn't his, displaying the same bone-deep integrity. The realization should have brought comfort. Instead, it triggered something darker in William, a perverse need to push further, to find the breaking point he was certain existed. Everyone had one. He'd learned this in business, in the aftermath of loss, when supposed friends had circled like vultures, eager to capitalize on his grief. If Daniel could resist $3,000, what about something more valuable? What about when accused, cornered, desperate? William stood abruptly, walking to his study where he kept his collection of watches. The Patek Philippe Grand Complication sat in its velvet case, a $200,000 masterpiece Grace had given him for their 10th anniversary. He lifted it carefully, remembering her smile as he'd opened the box. "So, you'll always have time for what matters," she'd said. He'd failed that promise spectacularly. With mechanical precision, William dropped the watch onto the marble floor. The crystal shattered, the delicate mechanism inside fracturing with a sound like tiny bones breaking. He placed the destroyed watch on the mantel in the main parlor where Sarah cleaned every morning, then returned to his study to wait. 3 days passed, days in which William watched Daniel continue his quiet routines, adjusting curtains, ensuring fresh water was available, sometimes leaving small wildflowers from the garden in a juice glass on the kitchen counter where William took his coffee. The boy never mentioned the wallet incident. Neither did Sarah, though William caught her looking at him with an expression he couldn't read, something between wariness and pity. On the 4th morning, William struck. He waited until Sarah was polishing silver in the dining room, Daniel helping her dry the pieces after school. The destroyed watch had been discovered. "Sarah." William's voice cracked through the mansion like a whip. "Sarah Thompson, bring your son to my study immediately." He heard the crash of something dropping, then hurried footsteps. Sarah appeared in the doorway, face pale, Daniel behind her with wide, frightened eyes. William held up the destroyed Patek Philippe, letting his manufactured rage fill the room like poison gas. "Do you know what this is?" His voice was ice. "This watch was worth more than you'll make in 5 years. It was an anniversary gift from my late wife, and now it's destroyed." Sarah's hand went to her throat. "Mr. Harrison, I don't understand. It was on the mantel yesterday, intact. Today, destroyed. You and your son are the only ones with access to that room." William turned his gaze to Daniel, whose face had gone white as paper. "Well, what do you have to say?" The silence stretched taut. Sarah stepped forward. "Mr. Harrison, please, there must be some mistake. I cleaned that room yesterday morning and there was no watch. I did it." Daniel's voice was small but clear. Sarah whirled to face her son. "Daniel, no. I'm sorry. Mom." The boy's eyes never left William's face. "I was looking at it. I know I shouldn't have touched it, but it was so beautiful. I just wanted to see how it worked. I dropped it. I'm so sorry." William knew it was a lie. The boy hadn't been in that room. The security cameras he'd reviewed confirmed it. Yet here stood Daniel, 12 years old, shoulders squared despite his trembling, taking blame for something he hadn't done, protecting his mother's job. "Do you have any idea what you've cost me?" William let venom drip from each word. "I'll pay for it," Daniel said quickly. "I can leave school, get a work permit. I'm good with computers. I can do data entry. I'll work every day after Mom's shift. Weekends, too. I know it will take years, but I'll pay back every penny. Just please, please don't fire my mom. This is my fault, not hers." Sarah made a sound like a wounded animal. "Daniel, stop. Mr. Harrison, he's trying to protect me. Please, If anyone should be held responsible, I have something. Daniel suddenly turned and ran from the room. William and Sarah stood in horrible silence until the boy returned, breathing hard, clutching a small wooden box. This is worth something, Daniel said, opening it with shaking hands. Inside lay a battered Timex watch, the band repaired with electrical tape. It was my dad's. He was wearing it in Kandahar when an IED went off. The shrapnel hit the watch instead of his artery. The medics said it saved his life. Daniel's voice cracked. He wore it through 3 tours. He was wearing it when he came home, when he got sick, The boy stopped, swallowing hard. It still works. You can hear it ticking if you hold it close. Maybe it's not worth $200,000, but collectors pay for military stuff, right? And there's this. Daniel pulled out something else, a Purple Heart medal. Dad got this after he saved 3 guys from a burning Humvee. That has to be worth something. And I have bonds my grandmother left me, about $3,000 for college, but you can have those too. I'll sign whatever papers you need. Just please, Mr. Harrison, don't punish my mom for my mistake. Sarah dropped to her knees beside her son, pulling him against her. Baby, no, you can't. These are all you have left of Daddy. He'd understand, Daniel whispered into her shoulder. He always said taking care of you was more important than anything. William stared at the boy offering his dead father's last possessions to pay for a watch William had destroyed himself. The Purple Heart caught the light, and William saw his own reflection in its surface distorted, ugly, unrecognizable. What had he become? This child was willing to sacrifice his most precious possessions, his education, his future, for a lie meant to protect his mother. The watch ticked in its box, counting out seconds of unbearable shame. William's hands trembled as he realized he was no longer testing the boy's character. He was revealing the monster his grief had made him become. William stood frozen, staring at the Purple Heart in Daniel's trembling hands. The moment stretched unbearably until he managed to speak, his voice rough. Put those away. We'll discuss repayment terms later. He turned abruptly and left the room, leaving mother and son clinging to each other in bewildered relief. For the next 2 days, the mansion felt like a held breath. Sarah arrived even earlier than usual, 5 in the morning instead of 5:30, and worked with a desperate intensity that made William's chest ache with guilt he refused to acknowledge. She declined her usual afternoon break, polished surfaces that already gleamed, and reorganized closets that needed no attention. When William left cash on the counter, her weekly tip that she'd always accepted gratefully, she left it untouched. The money sat there like an accusation until William finally removed it. Daniel had become a ghost. The boy still came after school but no longer made his rounds to check on William. He stayed in the kitchen doing homework while Sarah worked, his usual quiet presence now absolutely silent. When William passed by the kitchen on the first evening, he saw Daniel bent over mathematics textbooks, his father's watch placed carefully beside him, as if drawing strength from its presence. The boy was working problems far above his grade-level calculus, from what William could see, preparing for a future that might include college, if they could somehow survive this. Aurora noticed the change immediately. The husky abandoned her usual spot by William's fireplace, instead stationing herself wherever Daniel happened to be. When the boy sat at the kitchen table, she lay across his feet. When he helped his mother carry supplies, she walked beside him like a white shadow. It was as if Nathan's dog had chosen a new boy to protect, and the significance wasn't lost on William. He found himself standing at windows, watching Daniel cross the grounds with Aurora at his side, the two of them creating footprints in the morning dew that William would later trace alone. On the second evening, William heard something that stopped him cold, Sarah crying. He'd been passing the servants' quarters when the sound filtered through the door. Not dramatic sobs, but the quiet, exhausted weeping of someone trying not to be heard. Daniel's voice came soft and steady. It's okay, Mom. We've been through worse. Remember what Dad used to say? Thompsons don't quit. We just find another way forward. You shouldn't have to be the strong one, Sarah whispered. You're 12 years old. You should be thinking about baseball and video games, not working to pay off impossible debts. I'd rather think about helping you, Daniel replied. Besides, Mr. Harrison isn't really mean. He's just sad. Aurora told me. Despite himself, William almost smiled at the boy's fancy. Sarah managed a watery laugh. The dog told you. She only loves sad people. She loved Nathan, and he must have been sad sometimes. She loves Mr. Harrison, and now she stays with me. Maybe sad people recognize each other. William retreated to his study, Daniel's words echoing in his mind. From the window, he could see the servants' quarters, a single light burning late into the night. He knew Daniel was still studying, preparing for a future that William had threatened to steal. Day 3 brought an unexpected visitor. Margaret Holloway, his 80-year-old neighbor, arrived unannounced at 10 in the morning. William heard her cane tapping against the marble foyer before Sarah escorted her to his study. Margaret had been Grace's closest friend, despite their age difference, one of the few people who still dared to visit. "You look terrible," Margaret announced without preamble, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. Her sharp blue eyes missed nothing. "Sarah, dear, might I have some tea? Take your time." When Sarah left, Margaret leaned forward. "I saw the boy in the garden yesterday. William. He was crying behind the greenhouse where he thought no one would see. That child who never complains, never asks for anything, was sobbing his heart out. Would you like to know why?" William said nothing, but Margaret continued anyway. He was holding his father's watch and apologizing to it. Apologizing to a dead man's watch for having to give it away. He said, "I'm sorry, Dad. I know you saved up for 6 months to buy this. I know Mom gave it to you for your birthday before your first deployment, but I have to take care of her like you asked me to. You're testing a child's soul. William Harrison, what are you trying to prove? That grief gives you the right to be cruel? That losing Grace and Nathan means you can destroy another mother and son?" Margaret's voice grew harder. "I knew Grace for 40 years. She would be ashamed of what you've become." "You don't understand," William began. "I understand perfectly. That boy reminds you of Nathan. Same eyes, same gentle nature, same instinct to protect others. And it terrifies you because you might care again. So you're trying to prove he's not worth caring about, that he'll disappoint you like you believe everyone will. But all you're proving is that you've become the kind of man Grace would have protected her son from." Margaret stood with difficulty, refusing William's automatic offer of help. "I've watched you for 10 years, hoping you'd find your way back to the living. That boy and his mother might be your last chance. Don't destroy them to protect yourself from feeling again." She left without waiting for response. William sat alone, hearing her cane tap down the hallway, hearing Sarah's polite farewell, hearing the silence that followed. He walked to the window and saw Daniel in the garden, pulling weeds from around Grace's rose bushes, work that wasn't his responsibility, that no one had asked him to do. The boy worked methodically, carefully, treating each plant as if it were precious. Aurora lay nearby, watching him with those knowing eyes. The next morning, day 4, William found something that changed everything. He'd been in the garden early, unable to sleep, when he discovered Daniel's journal on the bench by the fountain. The boy must have forgotten it after his evening visit to the roses. William picked it up, intending to return it unopened, but a page fell out, a drawing of Aurora so detailed and beautiful it took his breath away. He shouldn't have looked further. He knew it was wrong, but he opened the journal and began to read. The first entry was dated 3 months ago. Day 1 at the big house. Mr. Harrison has the saddest eyes I've ever seen, except for Mom's after Dad died. His house is beautiful, but feels empty. Like our hearts felt empty. I hope we can help him somehow. William sank onto the bench, reading entries that mapped the geography of a child's enormous heart. Day 15, Mr. Harrison looked at the family picture in the hallway for 20 minutes today. Then he went to his room. I could hear him crying. I wanted to knock and tell him it gets better, but Mom says sometimes people need to be alone with their sadness. Day 23. Aurora let me pet her today. Mom says she belonged to Mr. Harrison's son. She must miss him so much. I told her about Dad, and I think she understood. Dogs know about missing people. Day 47. I've been having the dream again, where Dad comes back. But this time, Mr. Harrison was in it too. We were all having dinner together like a real family. When I woke up, I drew this picture. Maybe someday I'll be brave enough to show Mr. Harrison. He needs to know that not everyone wants his money. Some of us just want him to be happy. Day 73. Mr. Harrison smiled today when I brought him lemonade. It was just for a second, but it made him look younger, like the man in the wedding photo in the library. I wish I could make him smile more. Day 89. I've decided what I want to be when I grow up. Not a doctor like I told Mom, but someone who helps sad people find happiness again. Like a heart doctor, but for feelings. Is that a real job? I'll have to look it up. But first, I want to practice with Mr. Harrison. The final entry was from yesterday. Mr. Harrison was so angry about the watch. I've never seen him like that. But I don't think he was really mad about the watch. I think he was mad about something else. Something hurting inside him. Mom always says hurt people hurt people. I wish he knew he doesn't have to hurt anymore. We could be his family if he'd let us. Not replacements for the ones he lost, but new family. Like how David isn't a replacement for my real dad, but still makes Mom smile. Some hearts are big enough for multiple families. William's hands shook as he closed the journal. This child, this boy he'd been tormenting, had been praying for his happiness, planning ways to heal him, seeing past his cruelty to the pain beneath. Daniel had offered his father's watch not just to save his mother's job, but because he truly cared about the man who was testing him so mercilessly. Day 5 brought Henry Lawson, William's lawyer, and the closest thing to a friend he still had. Henry arrived for their monthly business review, but his sharp eyes took in William's haggard appearance, the untouched breakfast tray, the way William kept glancing toward the garden where Daniel was helping the groundskeeper. He reminds you of Nathan, doesn't he? Henry said without preamble, following William's gaze. Everyone keeps saying that, William muttered, because it's obvious to everyone but you that you're punishing that boy for not being Nathan, or maybe for being too much like him. Henry opened his briefcase, pulling out a folder. I did some checking on Sarah Thompson. You should know what you're dealing with. I didn't ask you to investigate my staff. You didn't have to. I've known you for 20 years, William. I know when you're about to do something you'll regret. Henry spread papers across the desk. Sarah Thompson, graduated summa cum laude from Columbia Teachers College. 7 commendations for excellence in teaching. Voluntary resignation to care for her dying husband. David Thompson, decorated veteran. 3 Purple Hearts, a Silver Star. Saved 6 men in his unit, including Senator Morrison's son. Did you know that the senator personally paid for David's funeral? Henry pulled out another sheet. Medical debt, $200,000 from experimental cancer treatments the VA wouldn't cover. She's been paying $50 a month for 3 years, will be paying for the rest of her life. Never declared bankruptcy because she says it would dishonor David's memory. Works 16-hour days. Hasn't bought herself new clothes in 2 years. Everything goes to Daniel's education and basic needs. The boy IQ of 147. Tested gifted but can't afford the special programs. Teachers say he's Massachusetts Institute of Technology material if he gets the chance. Volunteers at the VA hospital every Saturday. Reading to blind veterans. Has never had a disciplinary issue. Ever. Henry's voice grew harder. This is the child you're torturing. William. A boy who volunteers to read to blind soldiers because it makes him feel closer to his dead father. A boy whose mother works herself into the ground to give him a future. What exactly are you trying to prove? William couldn't answer. Henry sighed, packing up his papers. Grace loved you for your kindness. William, she fell in love with the man who spent weekends volunteering at the children's hospital, who set up scholarships for underprivileged kids. who believed money meant nothing if it wasn't used to help others. That man would be horrified by what you did with that watch. I know, William whispered. Then fix it, before you destroy something precious that can't be repaired. Henry left, but his words lingered. William walked to Nathan's room, preserved exactly as it had been 10 years ago. Trophies lined the shelves, pictures covered the walls, and in the corner, Aurora's old bed, which she'd abandoned after Nathan died. William picked up a photo Nathan at 8, grinning, holding a caught fish, the same age Daniel had been when he lost his father. That night, day 6, a violent storm struck Connecticut. William heard it approaching thunder rolling across the sound like artillery fire. From his bedroom window, he could see the servants' quarters, could see the lights flicker and die as the power failed in that section of the property. The main house's generator kicked in immediately, but the servants' quarters had no backup power. For an hour. William told himself it wasn't his concern. Sarah had weathered worse. They had blankets. It would be fine. Then he heard the knocking urgent, desperate. He found Sarah at the kitchen door, soaked from the short run across the courtyard, face white with fear. Mr. Harrison, please. Daniel's sick. He's burning up with fever, and I can't see to give him medicine. The pharmacy is closed, and I can't. William didn't think. Bring him to the main house. But, sir. Now, Sarah. He watched her run back through the rain and return carrying Daniel, the boy's body limp in her arms. William led them to a guest room, turning on every light. Daniel's face was flushed, his breathing labored. Sarah's hands shook as she tried to take his temperature. When did this start? William found himself kneeling beside the bed. This afternoon. He didn't tell me he felt sick. He never complains. Sarah's voice broke. He's all I have, Mr. Harrison. If something happens to him, nothing will happen to him. William took charge with an authority he hadn't felt in years. Sarah, there's medicine in my bathroom cabinet, fever reducer. Antibiotics from when I had pneumonia last year. Bathroom down the hall has cold compresses. I'll stay with him. Sarah hesitated. William's voice gentled. Go. I'll watch him. For the next 6 hours, William sat beside Daniel's bed. The boy tossed in fever dreams, sometimes calling for his father, sometimes mumbling about math problems, once reaching out and gripping William's hand with surprising strength. Don't go, Daniel whispered, eyes still closed. Please don't leave me too. Dad. William's throat closed. He held the boy's burning hand, remembering another fevered night, another child, another desperate vigil that had ended with sunrise and Nathan's fever breaking. I'm here, he whispered. I'm not going anywhere. Around 3 a.m, Daniel's eyes opened, focusing with difficulty on William's face. Mr. Harrison, am I in trouble? No, son. You're sick. Just rest. I'm sorry about your watch. I'm sorry I remind you of him. Mom says I do. That's why you're sad when you look at me. Daniel's voice was weak but clear. I wish I could bring him back for you. I'd trade places if I could. Then you'd have your real son, and Mom would be okay because she's stronger than you. She knows how to live with ghosts. William felt something crack inside his chest, a wall he'd built brick by brick for 10 years. Don't say that. Don't ever say that. It's okay, Daniel whispered, already drifting back to sleep. I understand. I'd want my real dad back too. The fever broke at dawn. Sarah had fallen asleep in the chair, exhaustion finally claiming her. William still held Daniel's hand, watching the sunrise paint the room gold. The boy's breathing was even now, peaceful, in sleep. Yes, he looked like Nathan. But awake. He was entirely himself, Daniel Thompson, a child who read to blind veterans, who talked to dogs about sadness, who wanted to become someone who healed hearts. Aurora padded into the room, having somehow escaped from William's study. She jumped onto the bed, curling against Daniel's side with a soft whine. The boy's free hand found her fur, fingers tangling in the white coat even in sleep. William looked at them, this boy, this dog, this woman who'd stayed awake all night for her child and felt something he'd thought dead forever, the possibility of healing, not replacing what was lost, but building something new from the ruins. Daniel had written it in his journal. Some hearts are big enough for multiple families. Maybe, William thought, watching the sunrise chase shadows from the room. His heart could learn to be one of them. The morning after the storm, William made his decision. He sent word through the estate's intercom, cold, formal, final. Sarah and Daniel were to meet him in the grand library at precisely 4 o'clock that afternoon. "Tell your son to bring what he considers his most precious possession," he instructed. "We'll settle the matter of the watch once and for all." Sarah's face had drained of color when she received the message. William watched from his study window as she stood in the courtyard, hand pressed to her mouth, shoulders shaking. Daniel, still pale from his fever but insisting he was well enough for school, had returned to find his mother sitting on the servants' quarters steps, clutching a white envelope. "Mom." William could see the boy's lips form the word, though he couldn't hear it from this distance. Sarah showed him something, a resignation letter. William realized she'd already written it, preparing for the worst. Daniel took the envelope from her hands, tore it in half, then hugged his mother with fierce determination. Whatever he said made Sarah cry harder, but she nodded, squaring her shoulders the way soldiers' wives learn to do. At 3:50, William positioned himself in the library. The room had been Grace's favorite, 3 stories tall, with a rolling ladder to reach the highest shelves, afternoon light streaming through stained glass windows that painted rainbows across leather-bound spines. The massive oak desk where he'd written his first business plan sat like an altar at the room's heart. This was where he'd proposed to Grace, where they'd decided to have Nathan, where they'd planned their lives with such certainty that tomorrow would always come. He heard their footsteps in the hallway, Sarah's measured pace, Daniel's lighter tread. When they entered, William noticed Sarah wore her best dress, the black one she'd worn to her interview 6 months ago. Daniel wore his school uniform, carefully pressed, his father's dog tags visible at his collar for the first time since William had known him. The boy carried a small wooden box, handmade, with D.T. carved into the lid in uneven childish letters. "Mr. Harrison," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the resignation letter clutched in her hand. "I want you to know that whatever happens today, I'm grateful for the opportunity you gave us. These 6 months. What's in the box?" "Daniel." William cut her off, his voice deliberately harsh. He had to play this role a little longer, had to push to the very edge to understand what these people were made of. Daniel stepped forward. His hands weren't shaking anymore. The fever had left him somehow stronger. Or perhaps it was the decision he'd made. "You asked for my most precious possession, Mr. Harrison, to pay for the watch. I did. At first, I thought you meant my dad's things, his watch, his medals. But those aren't really my most precious possession. They're just things that belong to him. Metal and glass." Daniel's voice grew stronger. "This is what's really precious to me." He opened the box with infinite care. Inside lay not a Bible, as William had expected, but a handmade book, bound with yarn through hole-punched pages. The cover was construction paper, decorated with a child's drawing of 2 hands reaching toward each other across a night sky. Written in crayon, faded but still legible, "Letters to Heaven for Dad, Private, by Daniel Thompson, age 9, 10, 11, 12. Daniel lifted the book out as if it were made of spun glass. "After Dad died, the counselor said I should write letters to him to help with the grief. She said I could mail them or burn them or keep them. I kept them, every single one. 3 years of letters." His voice cracked slightly. "I write to him every week. Tell him about school, about Mom, about things I see, about you." William's chest tightened. "Daniel, I don't need... Please." The boy's eyes met his directly for the first time since the watch incident. "You asked for my most precious possession. This is it. If you're going to take it, you should at least know what it is. Daniel opened the book carefully. The first page showed a drawing in colored pencil, a man in military uniform, standing tall, smiling. Below it, in the careful printing of a 9-year-old, "Dear Dad, you died today. Mom says you're in heaven. I don't know the address. I hope these letters find you. Love, Daniel." The boy turned pages slowly. Each letter was dated, some short, others running multiple pages. Drawings filled the margins, memories captured in crayon and marker. A Christmas tree, a baseball glove, a woman crying at a kitchen table. "This one," Daniel said, stopping at a page covered in tear stains, "is from when Mom got sick last year. I was so scared she'd die too." He read aloud, his voice steady. "Dear Dad, Mom has pneumonia. The doctor says she'll be okay, but she looks like you did near the end, gray and tired. I try to be strong like you taught me, but sometimes I hide in the bathroom and cry. Please ask God to let me keep her. I promise I'll be good. I'll never complain about anything again. Just please let me keep Mom. Your son, Daniel." William wanted to tell him to stop, but his voice wouldn't work. Daniel kept turning pages, past letters about school bullies, about the day they lost their apartment, about starting work at the Harrison estate. Then he stopped at a more recent entry, the handwriting more mature. "This is from last week," Daniel said quietly. "After you accused me about the watch." The letter was longer than the others, covering 2 pages in neat cursive. "Dear Dad, something happened today that I need to tell you about. Mr. Harrison. He's the man Mom works for. He thinks I broke his expensive watch. I didn't. But I said I did because Mom needs this job. Remember when you taught me that sometimes lying is wrong, but letting someone else suffer is worse? I think this is one of those times. Mr. Harrison is so sad. Dad, he lost his family like we lost you. I see him looking at their pictures when he thinks no one is watching. He has your eyes when you were sick, like he's looking at something far away that hurts to see. I wish I could help him. I think maybe God sent us here not just for the job, but because Mr. Harrison needs family, and we need someone to take care of. Is that stupid? Mom says I always want to fix broken things. But isn't that what you did? You fixed broken countries, broken peace, broken hearts. I want to be like you. Your son, Daniel. P.S. If you see Mr. Harrison's son Nathan up there, tell him his dad loves him so much it's making him sick. Maybe that will help somehow." Sarah made a sound, half gasp, half sob. Daniel turned to the last entry, dated yesterday, written in pencil while he was sick. "Dear Dad, I might be dying. I have a really high fever and everything hurts, but I'm not scared. If I die, I'll see you. But I'm worried about 2 people. Mom will be alone. And Mr. Harrison, Dad, he held my hand all night. He stayed with me just like you used to when I was sick. He called me son once when he thought I was asleep. I think he forgot I wasn't Nathan. Or maybe for a minute he didn't care. Dad, I found someone who needs love as much as I need a father. Is it wrong to want him to be my family? Not to replace you. Never to replace you. But to be new family. Like how a heart can love more than one person. If I don't die. I want to tell him that we could help each other. But I'm scared he'll just push us away. What should I do? Your son forever, Daniel. P.S. I love you. P.S.S. I'd give him all my memories of you if it would make him stop hurting." Daniel closed the book carefully and held it out to William. 3 years of letters. Every memory I have of my dad written down. Every conversation we never got to have. It's worth more to me than anything else in the world. But if it pays for the watch, if it lets Mom keep her job, then it's yours. William stared at the book in the child's outstretched hands. Inside were the private conversations between a boy and his dead father, the sacred space where grief and love intertwined. Daniel was offering him his soul, essentially the part of himself that held his father's memory alive. "There's also this," Daniel said, reaching back into the box. He pulled out a photograph, a family Christmas picture. David Thompson in civilian clothes. Sarah glowing with happiness. Daniel probably 7 years old, grinning with a gap-toothed smile. "Our last Christmas together. And Dad's Purple Heart. And this." He pulled out a folded paper. "I drew this last month, before everything with the watch." William unfolded the paper with numb fingers. It was a pencil drawing of remarkable skill himself, sitting in his study, but not alone. Shadow figures surrounded him, gentle and protective. Grace and Nathan were recognizable, but also David Thompson in uniform, and an older couple who might have been William's parents. At the bottom, Daniel had written, "Nobody is ever really alone. Love doesn't die. It just waits for us to remember." William's hands shook. He looked up to find Sarah watching him with an expression he couldn't read. Then she spoke, and everything shifted. "I knew," Sarah said quietly. "About the test. About the wallet. About the watch." William's head snapped up. Sarah continued, her voice steady. "Margaret told me the day after the wallet incident. She saw you from her garden window, saw you pretending to sleep. She told me you were testing Daniel. She warned me we should leave." "Then why?" William's voice came out rough. "Because Margaret also told me about Grace and Nathan, about how you've been dying inside for 10 years, about how Daniel has Nathan's eyes." Sarah stepped closer to her son, hand on his shoulder. "I stayed because I've been where you are. After David died, I wanted to die too. The only thing that kept me breathing was Daniel needing me. But you don't have that. You have no one who needs you." She took a breath. "I kept quiet about your tests because I wanted Daniel to show you who he really is. Not because I wanted your money or even this job, Mr. Harrison, but because my son has the biggest heart I've ever known. And I thought maybe he could help you remember what it feels like to have someone see past your pain to the person you used to be." Sarah's voice grew stronger. "Daniel isn't Nathan. He'll never be Nathan. But he's a boy who needs a father figure, and you're a man who needs to be needed. I stayed because sometimes God puts broken people together not to fix each other, but to make something new from the pieces." Daniel looked between his mother and William, understanding dawning on his face. "Mom, you knew he was testing me." "Yes, baby. And you let him." Sarah knelt beside her son. "Because I knew you'd pass every test. Because you're your father's son, honest, brave, and kind, even when the world isn't kind back. Because Mr. Harrison needed to learn that lesson for himself." Daniel turned to William, and for a moment, the boy looked far older than 12. "You broke your own watch, didn't you?" William couldn't speak. He nodded once. "Why?" Daniel's question held no anger, only curiosity. "Because—" William's voice broke. He cleared his throat, tried again. "Because caring about people means they can be taken away. And I can't. Yes, they can be taken away." Daniel said simply, "My dad was. Your family was. But that doesn't mean we stop caring. Dad told me once that courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing even when you're terrified. Loving people when you know you could lose them, that's the bravest thing there is." The boy stepped forward and placed the book of letters in William's hands. "Keep this, not as payment for anything, as a gift. So you can see that love doesn't end just because someone dies. It just gets written differently. In letters no one can mail. In gardens we tend for people who can't see them. In lonely boys we help even when they remind us of the sons we lost." William looked down at the handmade book in his hands, this catalog of a child's grief and love, offered freely by a boy he'd tried to break. The weight of it, not physical but emotional, threatened to buckle his knees. In the box. The Purple Heart caught the light, and David Thompson's watch ticked steadily, counting moments that led to this one. "Daniel," William began, but found he had no words for what he wanted to say. "How did you apologize for testing a child's soul? How did you explain that grief had turned you into someone you didn't recognize?" The boy seemed to understand. He stepped forward and did something that shattered William's last defense. He hugged him. Not the careful, distant embrace of a child hugging an employer, but the fierce, wholehearted hug of a boy who understood brokenness and chose love anyway. "It's okay," Daniel whispered against William's chest. "We're all just doing our best with the pieces we have left." William's arms came up slowly, as if remembering how to hold a child. When they closed around Daniel, something inside him that had been frozen for 10 years finally began to thaw. William stood frozen in Daniel's embrace, the boy's arms wrapped around him with a certainty that defied everything William had done to push him away. The letters to heaven pressed between them, and William felt something deep inside him crack like ice on a warming river. His arms tightened around Daniel involuntarily, and suddenly he was holding not just this boy, but the ghost of another Nathan, who used to hug him just like this, fierce and complete, as if love could be transferred through proximity alone. The crack widened, and William heard himself make a sound he didn't recognize, a keening that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and abandoned inside him. His knees buckled, and he sank to the library floor. Daniel still in his arms, Sarah rushing forward in alarm, but the boy didn't pull away. Instead, Daniel adjusted his position, kneeling with William, maintaining the embrace as if he understood that letting go now would mean losing something irretrievable. "It's okay," Daniel whispered, his young voice steady. "It's okay to cry, Mr. Harrison. Mom says tears water the seeds of new beginnings." And William broke. 10 years of carefully constructed walls crumbled in seconds. The tears came like a dam bursting, violent, unstoppable, primitive. He sobbed for Grace, for Nathan, for the decade he'd spent as a walking corpse in an expensive suit. He cried for the birthdays he'd missed, the bedtime stories never read, the basketball games that would never be played. He wept for the sound of Nathan's laugh, which he could barely remember, and for Grace's smile, which he could never forget. Images crashed through his mind in merciless succession. Nathan at 5, losing his first tooth and insisting they wait up for the tooth fairy together. Grace in her wedding dress, spinning in their first apartment, laughing as she got tangled in the train. Nathan's last morning, complaining about his math homework, bargaining for 5 more minutes of sleep. The police officer at his door that night, hat in hand, mouth moving with words William couldn't comprehend because comprehension would mean accepting the impossible. "The last thing I said to him," William gasped between sobs, "was hurry up or you'll be late. Not, I love you. Not, be careful. Just hurry up." And Grace, she kissed me goodbye, and I was reading emails. I didn't even look up. I didn't watch them leave. I didn't know it was the last time. Sarah knelt beside them, her hand on William's shoulder, and he felt the weight of her own understanding, a woman who'd had her own last morning, her own regrets. "They knew," she said softly. "Trust me, Mr. Harrison. They knew you loved them. Children always know. Spouses always know. Love isn't just in the last words. It's in every morning you made breakfast, every story you read, every time you came home tired but still played catch. They knew." William's sobs intensified, years of grief pouring out onto the library floor. Daniel never let go. This child who'd lost his own father, who had every reason to protect his own heart from another broken adult. The boy held on as if he could anchor William to the present through sheer determination. "After they died," William said, his voice raw, "everyone wanted something. Lawyers, relatives, business partners. They all came with their hands out, telling me how sorry they were while calculating what they could get. I learned that grief makes you vulnerable and vulnerability makes you prey. So I stopped feeling anything. I fired anyone who made me remember I was human. I turned their deaths into a reason to be cruel." He pulled back slightly, looking at Daniel's face. seeing tears streaming down the boy's cheeks too, not from fear but from empathy. This child who'd been willing to give up his father's watch, his college funds, his precious letters, all to protect his mother from William's manufactured cruelty. "I tested you," William said, the confession ripping from his throat. "The wallet, the watch, I broke it myself. I wanted to prove you were just like everyone else, that you'd take advantage, that you'd disappoint me. I wanted to prove that caring about you would be a mistake." Daniel's eyes widened, but he didn't pull away. Sarah's hand tightened on William's shoulder, though whether in anger or comfort, he couldn't tell. "I know what I did was unforgivable," William continued, self-loathing thick in his voice. "I terrorized a child. I made your mother cry. I threatened your future to protect myself from feeling anything. I've become exactly the kind of monster I used to protect Nathan from. The kind of man who hurts others because he's hurting." He stood abruptly, stepping away from them both, his legs unsteady. The distance felt necessary, like quarantine from contagion. "You should leave, both of you, tonight. I'll write a check 6 months severance for Sarah, a full scholarship fund for Daniel, enough to start over somewhere far from here. But you need to go. Now. Before I do more damage." "No." The word came from Sarah, firm and clear. She stood, brushing off her dress, and faced William with a strength that seemed to fill the room. "We're not leaving. This isn't a request. Sarah, you're fired. Both of you. Pack your things and—" "We don't abandon family, Mr. Harrison." Sarah's voice cut through his protests. "And that's what you've become, whether you admit it or not." William stared at her. "Family, I tested your son's character like he was a lab experiment. I made him offer his dead father's possessions to pay for something I broke myself. What kind of family does that—" "The broken kind," Sarah replied simply. "The kind that's still learning how to trust again. The kind that makes mistakes because they're terrified of being hurt. The same kind of family I was after David died, when I wouldn't let Daniel have friends over because I was afraid their happiness would remind me of what we'd lost." Daniel stood too, moving to stand beside his mother. "You can fire us, Mr. Harrison, but you can't stop us from caring about you. That's not how caring works. Trust me. I've tried. After Dad died, I tried not to care about anything because caring hurt too much. But it doesn't work. The caring just builds up inside until it finds another way out. I don't deserve—" William began. "Nobody deserves love," Daniel interrupted, sounding older than his years. "That's why it's called love and not wages. You don't earn it. You just get it. And you give it, even when it's scary. Even when the person you're giving it to is pushing you away because they're scared too." William looked at them, this widow and her fatherless son, standing in his library with their chins raised and their hearts open, refusing to be dismissed. They should hate him. They should take his money and run. Instead, they stood there offering something he'd forgotten existed: unconditional acceptance. "Don't you understand?" William's voice cracked. "Everyone I love dies. Grace, Nathan, my parents, everyone. If I let myself care about you, then maybe we'll die," Sarah said baldly, making William flinch. "Or maybe you'll die first. That's what love is, Mr. Harrison. It's saying, I know this will end in loss, but I'm going to love you anyway. David knew he was dying for months before he told me. He knew he was leaving us, but he loved us harder in those last months than some people love in a lifetime. Because love isn't about forever. It's about right now." She stepped closer to William. "You think you're protecting yourself by pushing us away, but you're already dead inside. You died 10 years ago with them. The only question is whether you want to stay dead or risk coming back to life." "It hurts too much," William whispered. "Yes," Sarah agreed. "It does. It hurts like hell. But the alternative is this: testing children, breaking your own possessions, living in a mausoleum of memories. Is that really better?" Daniel pulled something from his pocket, the drawing he'd shown William earlier. the one of him surrounded by shadowy figures of love. "Mr. Harrison, look at this again. Really look." William took the drawing with trembling hands. This time he noticed details he'd missed in the corner, barely visible. Daniel had drawn himself and Sarah, not as shadows but as solid figures, reaching toward William. At the bottom, in tiny letters he hadn't seen before, Daniel had written, "Love multiplies. It doesn't divide." "Nathan isn't here," Daniel said quietly. "I can't be him. I won't try to be him. But I am here. And I need—" His voice caught. "I need a dad. Not to replace mine, but because I have all this love that I learned from him, and nowhere to put it. And you need a son. Not to replace Nathan, but because you have all this love you learned from being his dad, and nowhere to put it. Maybe we could help each other figure out where all that love is supposed to go." William looked at this child who should fear him, who should run from him, who instead stood offering his heart like it was the most natural thing in the world. He thought of the letters to heaven, of Daniel writing to his dead father about William's pain, praying for a stranger's happiness, even while being tested by that stranger's cruelty. "I don't know how," William admitted. "I don't know how to be a father anymore. I barely know how to be human." "We could learn together," Daniel suggested. "You could teach me about business and chess and all the things fathers teach sons. And I could teach you what Mom taught me, that crying doesn't make you weak, and laughing doesn't mean you've forgotten the people you lost, and that loving someone new doesn't mean loving the memory of someone else any less." Sarah moved closer, until the three of them stood in a loose circle in the fading afternoon light. "We're not asking you to be perfect, William. We're not asking you to forget Grace and Nathan. We're asking you to let us be here, with all your broken pieces, with all your fears, with all your tests and walls and grief. We're asking you to let us be your family, messy and complicated and real." William felt himself at a crossroads. One path led back to the safety of isolation, to the familiar comfort of grief without risk. The other path led toward these two people who'd seen him at his absolute worst and inexplicably chosen to stay. "What if I hurt you again?" he asked. "Then we'll forgive you," Sarah said. "What if I can't love you the way you deserve?" "Then we'll love you the way you need," Daniel replied. William looked at them both, Sarah with her quiet strength, Daniel with his impossible grace, and made a choice, not to be healed, not to be whole, not even to be happy, just to try, to let them try. "Stay," he whispered, the word barely audible. Then louder, "Please, stay." Daniel smiled, not the careful smile of an employee's son, but the radiant smile of a boy who'd just been given permission to love without reservation. He stepped forward and took William's hand. "We already decided to," he said. "We're Thompsons. We don't give up on family." But it's EJ. And for the first time in 10 years, William found himself believing that perhaps family wasn't just about blood or loss or the people who were gone. Perhaps it was also about the people who refused to leave, even when you gave them every reason to go. The morning after William's breakdown, Henry Lawson arrived at the estate unannounced, his black town car crunching up the gravel drive at 7:30. William was in the breakfast room with Sarah and Daniel, an unprecedented arrangement that had happened naturally when Daniel had appeared with a physics textbook, asking for help with a problem. Sarah had been serving breakfast. William had gestured for them both to sit, and somehow they'd ended up sharing scrambled eggs and discussing momentum and velocity while Aurora begged for bacon under the table. Henry entered without knocking, a privilege earned through 25 years of friendship, and stopped short at the domestic scene. His sharp lawyer's eyes took in Daniel's relaxed posture, Sarah's small smile, William's hand resting naturally on the physics textbook, and something in his expression shifted from concern to relief. "I need to show you something, William," Henry said, setting his briefcase on the table. "All of you. Actually, this concerns everyone in this room." He pulled out a manila envelope, aged and official looking. "After our conversation last week, I went to the bank. You never cleaned out Grace's safety deposit box. You gave me power of attorney to handle it, but told me to leave it alone. I thought it might be time." William's hand stilled on the textbook. "Henry, I don't think—" "There was a letter," Henry interrupted gently. "Addressed to you. dated a week before the accident. She must have put it there when she renewed the life insurance papers. You need to read it. With trembling fingers, William took the cream-colored envelope. Grace's handwriting spelled out his name in her distinctive script, half cursive, half print, always rushing forward like she was trying to keep up with her thoughts. Inside was a single sheet of her personal stationery, the watermark of forget-me-nots visible when he held it to the light. "My darling William," he read aloud, his voice catching on the first words. "If you're reading this alone, then something has happened to me. I hope you never have to read it at all. But my grandmother always said to leave letters for the people we love, just in case we forget to say everything that matters. So here is what matters. You are the love of my life. Not were, are, present tense, always. Because love doesn't recognize death as having any authority. If I'm gone, I'm still loving you from wherever I am. Probably annoying angels with stories about your terrible dancing and your perfect heart. If Nathan is gone too, God, I can barely write that, then you're drowning right now. I know you, William. You're blaming yourself for not protecting us, for working too much, for 1,000 imagined failures. Stop. We had 8 years with our son and 16 years together. We had more happiness than most people get in 3 lifetimes. But here's what I need you to know. You have so much love left to give. It didn't die with us. It's still there, waiting. One day, unexpected angels will appear. They might not look like angels. They might look like broken people who need you as much as you need them. Open your heart to them, not to replace us, never to replace us, but to honor us. Because the only thing worse than us being gone would be your love dying with us. Love isn't finite, my darling. It multiplies. The love you gave Nathan doesn't disappear, it just needs somewhere new to go. Find that somewhere, find that someone, and love them with the same fierce devotion you loved us. That's how you honor our memory, not by dying inside, but by living twice as hard. I love you beyond words, beyond time, beyond death. Forever your Grace. P.S. Remember what Nathan said when Goldfish died. Love doesn't fit in boxes. Daddy. It just floats around until it finds a new home. Our 7-year-old philosopher was right. Let your love find a new home. William set the letter down with shaking hands. Daniel had moved closer, not touching but present, while Sarah quietly wiped tears from her cheeks. "There's more," Henry said gently. He pulled out another document. "This is why I needed everyone here. Sarah, did your husband ever mention serving with a Lieutenant James Morrison?" Sarah's brow furrowed. "Jimmy." "Yes, David saved his life. Pulled him from a burning Humvee. Why? James Morrison was William's nephew, his sister's son?" The room went absolutely still. Sarah's mouth opened, but no sound came out. William stared at Henry as if he'd spoken in tongues. "That's impossible," William whispered. "James died in Afghanistan. Patricia said it was an IED. He was injured by an IED," Henry corrected. "Severely. But he survived because Sergeant David Thompson pulled him out of the vehicle and carried him 200 yards under fire to the medic station. David took 3 bullets in the process. That's what earned him his Silver Star. James lost his leg but lived. He's a prosecutor in Boston now." Henry pulled out a photograph, a young man in a wheelchair, smiling, holding a law degree. "James has been trying to find David's family for 3 years. When David died, James was still in rehabilitation, couldn't travel. By the time he could, you'd moved. Sarah, he wanted to thank you, to tell Daniel that his father was a hero." "David never told me the soldier's last name," Sarah breathed. "Just Jimmy. Said it didn't matter who he was, just that he got home." Henry turned to William. "When I was investigating Sarah's background last week, the name David Thompson seemed familiar. I did some digging. Your nephew is alive because of Daniel's father, this family. William, they were always meant to find you. William looked at Daniel, seeing him anew. This boy's father had saved his nephew, given Patricia back her son. The connections were too intricate for coincidence, too perfect for random chance. Grace's words echoed unexpected angels. Margaret Holloway's voice came from the doorway. Since we're revealing truths, I suppose it's my turn. Everyone turned to find the elderly woman standing there, Aurora at her side. The dog, who rarely left Daniel now, was wagging her tail in a way William hadn't seen since Nathan was alive. "How did you get in?" William asked, though he wasn't really surprised. Margaret had a way of appearing when needed. "Sarah, dear, you left the kitchen door open." Margaret walked in, her cane tapping against the floor. "But I would have used my key if necessary, the one Grace gave me 15 years ago." She settled into a chair with careful dignity. "William, it's time you knew. I'm not just your neighbor. I'm Grace's great-aunt, her grandmother's sister." William felt the ground shift beneath him. "That's not Grace would have told me. Grace didn't know until the last year of her life. I reached out after Nathan was born. We'd been estranged from that side of the family over some ancient foolishness, property disputes, hurt feelings, the stupid things that separate families. Grace wanted to tell you, but I asked her not to. I wanted to know you both without the complication of family expectations." Margaret's eyes softened. "She made me promise to watch over you if anything happened. For 10 years. I've been honoring that promise, watching you die inside, helpless to stop it, until I saw Sarah's application in your mail 6 months ago." "You saw my application?" Sarah asked, confused. Margaret smiled. "I may have been visiting when William was out and noticed it in the stack he'd rejected. A widow with a young son, desperate but proud, experienced with grief but not broken by it. I may have moved it to the acceptance pile. And I may have suggested to William's housekeeper at the time that she'd be happier working elsewhere." "You orchestrated this," William said, not sure if he was angry or amazed. "I guided it," Margaret corrected. "The rest was up to all of you. I couldn't make Daniel have integrity. I couldn't make Sarah have strength. I couldn't make you see what was right in front of you. All I could do was put the right people in proximity and hope." She stood, walking over to Aurora. "Tell him, Henry, about the dog." Henry smiled slightly. Aurora was Nathan's puppy. Got her 3 months before the accident. After Nathan died, she wouldn't let anyone near her except the groundskeeper who fed her. She bit 2 veterinarians, growled at everyone who tried to pet her. William kept her anyway, even though she basically lived like a ghost on the property. "Until Daniel arrived," Margaret said. "First day, she walked right up to him, started following him around like she'd been waiting for him. Dogs know things. William, she knew Daniel belonged here before any of us did." William looked at Aurora, who was now pressed against Daniel's leg, her tail wagging slowly. Nathan had trained her to respond to certain words with specific actions, parlor tricks they'd practiced for hours. On impulse, William spoke the word Nathan had taught her, family. Aurora immediately moved between all of them, sitting in the center of their loose circle, looking up at each face in turn, a trick Nathan had called counting the pack. She'd only ever done it when all 3 of them, William, Grace, and Nathan, were in the same room. "She knows," Daniel said wonderingly. "She knows we're supposed to be together." Margaret smiled. Grace believed in meant to be. She'd say this was proof David saving James, me being her aunt, Aurora choosing Daniel, Sarah being a teacher like Grace was before Nathan was born. Too many connections to be chance. William's mind reeled with the revelations. Daniel's father had saved his nephew. Margaret was family. Had been watching all along. Aurora had recognized something in Daniel that William had fought against seeing. And Grace had written him permission to love again. Had practically commanded it. "There's one more thing," Henry said. "I didn't investigate just Sarah last week. I also looked into Margaret's claim about orchestrating things." He pulled out a final document. "Margaret has been paying Sarah's rent, anonymously, through a shell organization. every month for 6 months, ensuring she could afford to keep working here despite the creditors circling. Sarah gasped. The housing assistance program, you... Margaret shrugged. Family helps family, even when they don't know their family yet. William stood slowly, looking around the room at these people connected by threads he was only now seeing threads of sacrifice, loss, love, and choice. David Thompson had saved his nephew. Margaret had been guarding him per Grace's wishes. Sarah had known about his tests and stayed anyway. Daniel had offered his most precious possessions to a cruel stranger. Aurora had recognized family before any of the humans had. Grace knew, he said quietly. Somehow, she knew I'd need you all. Or maybe, Daniel suggested, wise beyond his years. Love just works that way. It connects people who need each other, even when they don't know it yet. Like my dad always said, there's no such thing as coincidence. Just love working undercover. Margaret moved toward the door. I'll leave you all to process this. But William Grace would be so proud of you for finally letting them in. And Nathan would have loved Daniel like a brother. I'm certain of it. As she left, Aurora moved back to Daniel's side, and William realized that all the testing, all the cruelty, all the resistance had been fighting against something that was always meant to be. Not a replacement for what was lost, but a new chapter in a story that Grace had somehow seen coming. We're really family, Sarah said softly. All of us. Connected before we even met. William nodded, understanding finally that Grace's letter had been right. Love doesn't fit in boxes. It floats around until it finds a new home. And it had found one here, in the most unexpected of ways. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it began immediately. That very afternoon, William called his accountant and established the Thompson Education Trust, fully funding Daniel's education from middle school through medical school, should he choose that path. When Sarah protested that it was too much, William simply said, David saved my nephew's life. This doesn't begin to balance that debt. Within a week, the servants' quarters were closed permanently. Sarah and Daniel moved into the main house, Sarah into the blue guest suite that had once been William's mother's. Daniel into a room down the hall from Nathan's preserved bedroom. Nobody pushed William to change Nathan's room. Some shrines needed to stand until they chose to fall on their own. Daniel approached the change with characteristic sensitivity. I don't need a lot of space, he'd said, standing in the doorway of his new room. Just somewhere Aurora can sleep. But William had seen the boy's eyes widen at the built-in bookshelves, the desk by the window overlooking the garden, the reading nook that seemed designed for a boy who wrote letters to heaven. This was my study when I was young, William told him. Before I married Grace, I wrote my first business plan at that desk. Maybe you'll write your medical school applications there. The real changes were smaller, quieter. William started joining them for breakfast every morning. Teaching Daniel advanced mathematics while Sarah cooked, she insisted on maintaining some of her duties, needing the rhythm of useful work. Dinners moved from the formal dining room to the kitchen table, where Aurora could supervise and conversations could flow naturally over simple meals. Daniel's afternoon routine evolved. Instead of checking on William from a distance, he'd knock on the study door at 4:30 precisely. Chess, he'd ask, and William would pretend to consider before agreeing. The boy learned quickly, his strategic mind grasping patterns with startling speed. But more than chess, they talked about school, about David's military service, about Nathan's favorite books, about Grace's garden that Daniel had taken to tending with religious devotion. Why the roses? William asked one afternoon, watching Daniel carefully prune the bushes Grace had planted. They're survivors, Daniel replied, not looking up from his work. They look delicate, but they come back every year, stronger than before, even after the worst winters. Mom says they're proof that beautiful things can grow from pain. Sarah became the house manager in title and truth, but more importantly, she became William's friend. Evenings often found them in the library, Sarah grading the correspondence courses she'd started teaching online, William reading nearby. They didn't always talk, but the companionable silence felt like healing. Sometimes she'd share a memory of David, Sometimes he'd tell her about Grace. Neither tried to fix the other's grief. They simply witnessed it, honored it, and let it coexist with whatever was growing between them all. 3 months in, William found Daniel in Nathan's room. The boy was sitting on the floor, not touching anything, just looking at the trophies and pictures. William's first instinct was to pull him out, to lock the door, to preserve the memorial. Instead, he sat down beside him. He liked baseball, Daniel asked, nodding at the Little League trophies. Loved it. Terrible player, though. Struck out more than anyone on the team, but he never stopped trying. William touched one of the trophies. This was for most persistent, the coach's nice way of saying he showed up even when he couldn't hit anything. Daniel smiled. I'm bad at sports too. Dad tried to teach me football, but I kept reading during practice. Nathan would have liked you, William said, surprising himself with the truth of it. You would have been the friend who helped him with homework while he taught you to at least catch a ball without falling down. That night, Daniel left a note under William's door. Thank you for letting me know, Nathan. Even though we never met, I feel like we're friends now. 6 months after the library revelation, Christmas approached with a mix of anticipation and dread. William hadn't celebrated Christmas in 10 years. The decorations had been sold or donated, the traditions buried with the people who'd made them matter. But Daniel and Sarah moved through December with quiet determination, not pushing but including him in their modest plans. We always get a small tree, Sarah mentioned casually over breakfast on December 15th. Nothing fancy. Daniel makes paper ornaments. I could draw Nathan, Daniel offered carefully. And Grace, so they can be part of it too. William found himself at a tree lot that afternoon, Daniel and Sarah beside him, arguing over a 12-foot Douglas fir that would dominate the living room. That's not small, he pointed out. It's small compared to the house, Daniel reasoned with 12-year-old logic. Besides, Aurora likes big trees. Don't you, girl? The dog barked once, tail wagging, and William found himself arranging delivery of the massive tree. Decorating became an unexpected bridge between past and present. William retrieved a box from the attic ornaments Grace had collected, each with a story. Daniel listened to each tale with rapt attention, hanging the decorations with ceremonial care. When they found Nathan's baby's first Christmas ornament, William's hands shook. Daniel took it gently, hanging it at eye level. So we see him first thing, Daniel explained. Mom and I do that with Dad's ornaments too. Sarah emerged from the kitchen with her own small box David's ornaments, worn and few but treasured. They hung beside Nathan's and Grace's. Families merged in branches and light. Daniel added his paper creations, surprisingly beautiful portraits of all of them, including those who were gone but not forgotten. Margaret arrived on Christmas Eve with pounds of cookies and generations of stories. Henry came for dinner, bringing his nephew James, who rolled his wheelchair up to Daniel and said, without preamble, "Your father was the bravest man I ever met." The evening filled with laughter and tears in equal measure, the house alive in ways it hadn't been for a decade. But Christmas morning was just the three of them, William, Sarah, and Daniel, with Aurora supervising the gift exchange. Daniel gave William a leather journal, handmade at school. "For new memories," he explained. Sarah presented William with a photo album already half-filled pictures she'd been taking for months of their new life together. William watched them open their gifts books for Daniel, jewelry for Sarah that had been Grace's, things chosen with care rather than expense. Then he pulled out an envelope, his hands trembling slightly. "This is for you, Daniel. If you want it, you can say no." Daniel opened the envelope, pulling out official-looking papers. His eyes scanned the first page, then widened impossibly. "Adoption papers. I know I can't replace your father," William said quickly. "I would never try. But if you'd let me, I'd like to be your legal father too, to make official what I already feel, that you're my son, in addition to David's son." Not instead of... Daniel looked at his mother, who was crying openly. You knew. Sarah nodded. William asked my permission last month. I said it was your choice. Daniel turned back to William, and his face showed a maturity beyond his years. Can I still be Daniel Thompson? You can be whoever you want to be. Then yes, Daniel said simply. Yes, I want you to be my dad too. He paused, then added, Nathan would want you to have a son again. And my first dad, he'd want me to have someone to teach me guy stuff. He wasn't very good at sports either. They signed the papers right there, Christmas morning, with Aurora as witness. When Daniel hugged William afterward, he whispered, I love you, Dad. And William's heart, which he'd thought irreparably broken, seemed to beat properly for the first time in 10 years. The day after Christmas, they drove to Fairfield Memorial Cemetery. William had avoided this place for 3 years, unable to bear the finality of granite and grass. But now he walked steadily, Daniel on one side, Sarah on the other, Aurora padding along unleashed. Grace and Nathan's headstones stood side by side, elegant marble that caught the winter sun. William had expected pain, but instead felt something like peace. Daniel stepped forward first, placing a bouquet of roses from Grace's garden. Hi, Mrs. Harrison. Hi, Nathan, he said clearly. I'm Daniel. I'm taking care of your husband and dad now. He's teaching me chess and calculus, and I'm teaching him that it's okay to laugh again. We had Christmas yesterday. He smiled a lot. Sarah placed her own flowers, simple daisies that somehow seemed perfect. Grace, thank you for lending us your husband. We promise to take good care of him. And William is taking beautiful care of us. You raised a good man. William knelt between the graves, his hand touching first one stone, then the other. I brought you our new family, he said quietly. Not a replacement. An addition. Daniel has your kindness. Nathan and Sarah has your strength. Grace. They're helping me remember who I used to be, who you loved me for being. Aurora suddenly howled the specific sound Nathan had trained her to make for I love you. She'd never done it at the graves before, but now she sat between the headstones and sang her lonely wolf song that somehow sounded like joy. She remembers, Daniel said wonderingly. We all remember, William replied. That's how love works. It remembers and continues and grows. It doesn't die. It just changes shape. As they walked back to the car, Daniel slipped his hand into William's, not the desperate grip of a child afraid of being left, but the confident hold of a son who knew he belonged. Sarah took William's other arm, and they walked together through the sleeping garden of stones, a family forged from loss but defined by love. That evening, as snow began to fall, they sat by the fire in the living room. Daniel was working on a letter not to heaven this time, but to James Morrison, thanking him for his words about David. Sarah was reading, her feet tucked under Aurora's warm weight. William sat in his chair, watching them, seeing not what was missing but what was miraculously present. The ghosts were still there, they always would be. Grace's laugh still echoed in certain corners. Nathan's footsteps still sounded on the stairs sometimes. But now there were new sounds, too. Daniel's voice calling, Dad, from the garden. Sarah humming in the kitchen. Aurora barking with joy instead of loneliness. William picked up the journal Daniel had given him and wrote his first entry. December 26th. Today. I am father to a brilliant boy who writes letters to heaven and tends roses like they're holy. Today. I share my home with a woman whose strength makes my walls unnecessary. Today. I understand what Grace meant about love multiplying. It doesn't divide between the living and the dead, between past and present. It simply grows larger, encompassing all, leaving no one behind. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in pristine white, not an ending but a beginning. Not covering the past, but preparing the ground for new growth. Spring would come, as it always did. And when it arrived, Grace's roses would bloom again, tended by a boy who understood that love, like roses, could survive any winter as long as someone remembered to care for the roots. In the warmth of the house that had become a home again, 3 people and 1 wise dog sat together, separate griefs woven into shared happiness. They were proof that sometimes the universe conspires to heal broken hearts, not by replacing what was lost, but by expanding what remained. Fortune, William had learned, wasn't measured in dollars but in the courage to love again after loss, in the grace to accept love when offered, and in the wisdom to know that every ending was just love changing form, never truly gone, always waiting to bloom again in unexpected ways. You know, I've told this story 100 times, and each time I tell it, I discover something new. Maybe it's because we see what we need to see when we need to see it. William Harrison thought he was testing a poor boy's character with that wallet, but really, he was begging someone to prove that love still existed in the world, and that 12-year-old child, who had every reason to take what wasn't his, chose instead to cover a grieving man with a blanket his mother had knitted. We talk about family like it's about blood, but it's not. It's about who shows up when you're pretending to sleep but dying inside. It's about who refuses to leave when you give them every reason to run. Sarah and Daniel Thompson didn't need William's money, they needed what he'd forgotten he had the ability to be needed. And William didn't need another son to replace Nathan, he needed permission to love Daniel for exactly who he was. Gratitude isn't about saying thank you. It's about recognizing that every person who stays in our lives, despite our sharp edges and broken pieces, is choosing to write their story with ours. That's what family really is, the people who choose you, again and again, until choosing becomes as natural as breathing.